So on the march back, on the march from the defense of Australia to Japan, one of the most important battles of this era was the battle at Okinawa. Um, Here you can see a picture of the invasion force of Okinawa. It's super important because it's only 350 miles from Japan, so it's a real milestone to take this island that is so close to the goal of the Marines, which was the invasion of Japan at that time. On the island were 100,000 Japanese soldiers stationed, and an invading force of allies, 180,000. The big problem was the kamikazes really come into effect during this battle. 2,000 kamikaze attacks on the American fleet. This meant a couple things to the American fleet. A, the Japanese were getting desperate, and they were, willing to throw men into the fire like that. They didn't just have kamikaze planes at this point. They would have men charge into their camp at night who didn't have weapons, who only had knives. I guess they didn't have rifles or any more ammunition, so they would have kamikaze runs into the camps of suicide human bombs, or they would come in with knives and try to hack Americans. It was crazy. Okinawa was an absolute terror place to be fighting. You can see some more pictures. Okinawa was a 3-month campaign. We won it, but we lost 50,000 Marines on that island. And here you can see one of the earlier airplanes that fired missiles. And here you can see they're burning out with flamethrowers here. Here you can see this looks like a scene from a movie, but this is the actual Marines on Okinawa. Now, back in the States, we were working on a very important project called the Manhattan Project. Here you can see one of the guys who was involved in it. You might know who he is, Albert Einstein. The Manhattan Project was this. The American government sat down and did a analysis of how they could beat the Japanese. They knew from going from island to island that the Japanese were going to fight until there were no Japanese left. So here were their options. If you were going to invade Japan, we were in this race with the Germans to build this atomic bomb. The Manhattan Project was the code name for that project of developing and researching the atomic bomb. This, to give you a short answer of how the atomic bomb works, the bomb splits an atom. This splitting of the atom inside a chamber inside the bomb creates a chain reaction which unleashes an incredible amount of energy, which makes the explosion that the atomic bomb causes, which, as you can see from, if you've ever watched videos of these tests they did in the desert, these were insanely powerful devices. And the ones we have now, I think they're 1,000 times more powerful than the original atomic bomb. Tested in New Mexico successfully in an area where there was no one living, but they weren't afraid to put soldiers right in the way of the atomic burst of energy that came out like a wave of energy that went over, and a lot of these guys got very sick. This is when we had our first experience with radioactive sickness. So here's the answer. Here's the question that faced Truman. It faced FDR first when they were developing it, and Truman later because FDR had died, and we'll talk about that in a second. Should we use it against them? Well, we have other ways to end the war. We could invade Japan. It could cost millions of lives, both for the Japanese and for whatever invading force. We'd have to go the entire length of the island, street by street, city by city, rooting out the Japanese. The Japanese were actually outfitting, they were running out of weapons, so they were outfitting women and children with sharpened bamboo to defend themselves against the invading force. We could blockade Japan and just carpet bomb it into into nothing, into rubble. We could detonate an atomic bomb on some deserted island and say to Japan, if you don't agree with what we want, this will be you. Or we could demand less of Japan, not ask for an unconditional surrender, which we did with Germany, and negotiate with Japan for its surrender. Harry F. Truman, because FDR had died, decided that he was going to use the bomb against Japan. And he really didn't have second thoughts about it. All right, going on to the second part of this lecture.